Altså, hvad er det tidligste, du kan huske?
Welcome, Jonas. Nice to meet you. Thank you very much for taking your time today. And of course, congratulations for your amazing movie. It's a wonderful film. But first of all, I wanted to know, how are you and how is the situation now in Denmark with the sanitary crisis?
I think we're going okay, actually. Now things are opening up. People are starting to get vaccinated, and we're kind of on a downfall. Like, we don't have more and more people getting ill here. So I think we're in a good place. But of course, people are tired and want to be able to be together and go to the cinemas and go to the concerts and go to the theaters and just be together. But hopefully during spring, we'll be able to do that again.
So let's talk about your film. And again, congratulations. It's a real story. It's a real character telling a true story for the first time. So in a way, the film is a kind of therapy, a liberation process using the speech by words. And at the same time, I wanted to know, how did you deal with this intimate process and the script writing, and also tell us a little more about the genesis of the film, of the project.
So I personally met Amin when I was 15 years old, and he arrived to my hometown, and he stayed in foster care with a family just next door from where I lived. I grew up in a very small town in Denmark, and he learned Danish really fast, and then we started high school together. Met every morning at the bus stop going to high school, and became very good friends. But that's 25 years ago now, and in all those years, he never told me or anyone else about how or why he got to Denmark. He came all by himself. And so, of course, being his friend, but also being a filmmaker and a storyteller, I was very interested in what happened, what was his story. Mm-hmm. But he didn't really want to talk about it. At some point, I've done a lot of radio documentaries here in Denmark. And at some point, I asked him if I could do his story as a radio documentary, if he would tell me his story. And he said he wasn't ready yet. Mm. And then years passed, and I was invited for this workshop at a place called the Animation Workshop here in Denmark, where they combine, it's a workshop called Anidocs, and they combine animators with documentary filmmakers. Mm-hmm. And they contacted me and asked if I had an idea for an animated documentary. And I thought of his idea again, and I asked him if he would tell his story as an animated documentary. And he finally said yes. And also because with the animation, we were able to make him anonymous, because he didn't have to kind of put his face on it. Like the first time he talks about his life trauma, he didn't have to put his face on it. Mm-hmm. So that was kind of where it all started.
How did you, when you write the script, how did you deal with this more technical way to do a structure and combine it with converge with the personal, intimately process?
So I did like a first master interview where, like, the first time he told me the story, and that was like 3 or 4 days where we spent the whole day together, and he started telling from, I just asked him, what's the first thing you remember? You see that in the film as well. And we kind of go back to Afghanistan in his childhood. And you remember he is in his childhood home in the garden, and his sister is telling stories about his father. That's his first memory. Mm-hmm. And then we just kind of went on. And of course, this is all recorded. So the voice you hear in the film is from the first time he tells his story. And I had all of this material, and then I transcribed everything and started to put it into a script. And of course, all the time talking to Amin and showing him the script and just making sure that everything was correct and that he felt that that what I was portraying was his life, actually, that he felt recognized in the story. So it was a lot about, material management in the beginning, in the script writing, just figuring out, okay, there's all these stories, and it's a long story, it's almost 35 years of lived life. Yeah. And he's telling all this, so you have to kind of structure and figure out, okay, what is the story I wanted to tell within the film, because I can't put all of the stories he told me in 90 minutes. So it was really to figure out what is the core of the story. And then in the process, I kind of figured out, okay, but this thing about looking for a home is basically what fleeing is about. If you cut everything away, fleeing is about someone who's getting forced out of their home and is looking for a new home. And I could see, because he was a dear friend, I could see that he was still looking for a new home when we did the film. And then when we had like a kind of locked script, we started editing, because I had all the voices, and then I did scratch voices where I myself, you know, all the other characters in the film. When we go back in the past, you hear his mother talk and his siblings and the human traffickers. And then I did personally all the scratch voices, and then we did like this really rough sound edit of it. And then we started doing the animatic, which is this really kind of raw edit, where we cut like in very kind of like in storyboards, and then build the story.
Yeah, it's a very, very complex movie, and also really well balanced. You have you have three very important elements: the animation, the sound design, and the music. You have an animation sometimes realistic, other times more expressive, more strange and dark. You have this sound design really amazing, especially with these nightmare moments of flea nightmare moments. And of course, you have this necessary fresh air with the music, with the pop music, with Aha, Roxette, and this lovely touching moment with Daft Punk in the end. So could you please come back to the filmmaking process and tell us a little more about the way you work with these three elements?
Definitely. So it's basically, it was really important to me to kind of keep the documentary vibe to the film. Like, it should feel authentic all the way through. And for that, we have like two different elements that we use. We have the realistic 2D animation, where we spend a lot of time on doing research and figuring out what did things look like in Afghanistan in the 80s and Moscow in the 90s, like being really precise on all the objects, like what did the telephone look like, what did the TV look like in Moscow in the 90s, to make sure that it would feel recognizable for people who actually live there, but also to make sure that it matched the archive material that we use, because that's the other element we use throughout the film, to kind of remind people that this is not a fiction, even though it might at times feel like it, but it's not a fiction. So we use this archive material throughout the film to remind people that this is real. It's a real lived life, and we have these kind of historical plot points from when Amin has to flee Afghanistan, for example, where we use archive material from that period where Amin actually had to flee, and it was just so important that going between this archive material and the realistic 2D animation, that it felt fluid, that it felt natural to go from one and the other. So it was important to be really realistic with the 2D animation as well, so they kind of match. And that we did that all through the film. And then, as you said, there's this third element, which is these kind of more kind of surreal and graphical sequences where it's a bit harder to read, but it's because we, like in its core, the film is really about, it's also about trauma and memory. So when Amin has a hard time talking about something, or has a hard time remembering something, we try to not be, then we're not precise. We dive into the emotion of fear, or of anger, or like when his sisters are trapped in a container, what does that feel like? Because we can't show it realistically, because he wasn't there. So when he talks about it, we need to kind of just go into the emotion he had about what he thought about it in his head. So these three things are really what the film is built of. Yeah.
And there is, I wanted to talk a little about the quality of the high level quality of the testimony of Amin, and because it's still a very complex movie, and with complex topics, and there is the film is talking about us about the Kabul in the 80s, Moscow in the 90s, but it's telling us about the reality today of the migrant crisis and about what does it mean to be a refugee today. And at the same time, there is a more personal and very discreet approach to the coming out of Amin in a traditional culture and inside the family. So I wanted to know about your personal experience. You know that there is a lot of film students in the audience, and it would be important to know how do you work in order to obtain this amazing quality in the words of in this case of Amin.
I think for the interviews I did with him, because I have a background in radio documentary, I used this technique that I've used for radio documentaries before, because in radio you don't have an image, so it's super important to have your subject paint an image for you. So that's why in the film, when I do the interviews, he's laying down, he has his eyes closed, and he talks in present tense. And it's really about trying to not make him retell the story, but to relive it. So when he talks about his first memory, I ask him, what's the first thing you remember? And he talks about being in his garden, in his childhood home, and his sister talks about his father. Then I asked him to be really precise about how everything looked, what kind of flowers were there, what were the colors, and he gave us a lot of information that we could use in the animation, and not a lot of it you actually don't hear in the film, but we use it for the animators to kind of remake the set. But what it also does is that when he starts talking, he kind of relives it, like he's back there, and I think that brings something. It takes you on a journey with him instead of just hearing him talk about his past. So it's really a different way of interviewing that I think worked really well for the animation here, because it really takes you on a journey instead of just you sit and hear him talk, retelling what happened. And then you also asked about the music. I forgot to answer that. I think because you know, it came as a surprise for me as well. But one of the first things he said when I asked him about his early memories was that he remembered that he had this pink Walkman and pink headphones that he used to listen to a lot. It was a gift from his sister, and he listened to Madonna and Whitney Houston and a-ha and all these pop songs that I had listened to myself, and also about having Jean-Claude Van Damme in there. Like, he watched those films, and I also watched those films in Denmark. So it was really a surprise for me, and I think this thing about being able to relate to him was super important for me to come across, and these pop culture references really is helpful there. And I realized, like, making the film, that how alike our lives were, even though he grew up in Afghanistan, in Kabul, and I grew up in Copenhagen, Denmark, that we listened to the same music, we saw the same films. He enjoyed playing volleyball, I enjoyed playing football. And then there's like this drastic turn in his life where everything just went crazy, but it didn't for me. So when he arrived to my hometown, he had this crazy backstory that I didn't know anything about. So I think that was really interesting. Did I answer all the questions?
Yeah, it was perfect. And thank you very much. Congratulations again for your movie. And I hope it's very frustrating to have this conversation like this, but I hope we will have the opportunity to meet in the next editions. And good luck with your next projects. And thanks again. Thank
you so much. I would love to be there, but yeah, this is how it is.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. Bye.
Bye.